Hello and welcome to the Evercade Retreat. My name is Gene Jake and today I'm talking about, well, what is the Evercade and why do I collect it and why you might want to, or might not. So the easy bit first, what is the Evercade? The first Evercade was released in 2020. It was a handheld device which took cartridges. These cartridges would have officially licensed games from various publishers and developers. The games on the cartridges were console games from the 8-bit, 16-bit and later 32-bit era. These collections all had red packaging. Later on they introduced an arcade line featuring the arcade originals, and these were packaged in purple. It was at this time they released the VS console, which essentially was just an Evercade in console form that had 2 cartridge slots on it. Later they released the Evercade EXP, an enhanced version of the handheld with a better screen, more RAM, 2 additional buttons to match the controllers from the Evercade VS, a Tate mode for playing vertical aspect ratio games, and a bunch of Capcom games pre-installed. Since then they have introduced a blue line of cartridges, the home computer line, including games from things like the Commodore 64, the Amiga, the MSX, and possibly more down the line. They've also introduced the Super Pockets. Now these technically aren't Evercade, they're by a sister company called Hypermegatech. They're portable handhelds that come pre-installed with games. Technically they're on par with the original Evercade for power, with a better screen, different form factor, and they'll play Evercade cartridges. And this year they have released, or are releasing, revised versions of the Evercade VS and the Evercade EXP. These are called the R editions, and also there's the upcoming release of the Evercade Alpha. That's a very brief overview. I will go more in depth as the video progresses, as it comes up and things are relevant. The cartridges themselves come in clamshell case and come with a booklet, like good old fashioned game cartridges did back in the day. The booklet will have a bit of nostalgia based information and other information about the game, controls and such. It's not massively in depth, but it's certainly enough to get you going. Part of the draw of the Evercade is the physical media. You know, it kind of really gives you that old school feeling. The collections are usually themed around a system, publisher or developer, although not exclusively. The early collections were all retro, however they did start doing sort of modern retro and indie games as well. With only 2 exceptions, every Evercade cartridge will work in the original Evercade, the EXP, the VS, the upcoming Evercade Alpha and the Hypermegatech Super Pockets. The exceptions are the Namco collections, which there's only 2 of, and that's due to licensing where Namco only licensed them for handheld usage. So if you put them in the VS, then they won't work. They tend to release about 12 cartridges a year, and all the carts are numbered, although there's the 3 different lines, so the numbering is separate for each line. This I suppose helps promote collectability. The only downside is, due to licensing, some cartridges are no longer being made. These are referred to as legacy cartridges. There's 5 or 6 now, maybe 7. I'm sure there'll be more in the future. Unfortunately, due to licensing laws, they can't just keep reprinting them indefinitely. Sadly, some of these legacy carts have become rather pricey on the second-hand market. Although I think if you search around you can find most of them at a relatively reasonable price. Just don't pay stupid scalper prices, that's just absurd. So that's the rough overview of what the Evercade is done. More details will naturally come out as the video progresses. But let's go on to my personal experience with it, or how I got started with it. A few years ago I was looking for a retro device. I considered getting some sort of retro Pi, or maybe even just like a mini PC or something to put in my living room and play off there. But I didn't want to be messing about with ROMs, trying to source them from dodgy sites, or get a device that had thousands of ROMs already that basically I wouldn't play. And in my prior experience with such things, a lot of the emulation wasn't good, or ROMs wouldn't run. And it's like, well, yeah, you've got thousands, but do you need all those thousands of games? You know, you just play the same things. You go and check out Sonic or, you know, Mario, Streets of Rage, whatever. So I kind of leaned against that. And I looked at the mini consoles, and it was the Mega Drive Mini 2 that caught my attention because there's a number of games on there I particularly liked, but it's limited to that selection. And again, I'm sure you could probably find ways to hack it and what have you, but again, that's not what I wanted to do. However, while I was doing my research on that and other mini devices, a video, when a video finished and it went on to autoplay the next one, it's one by the same person or the same reviewer of it, and they were reviewing an Evercade cart. And I thought, well, what's this? So I looked into it. And yeah, I started investigating. I watched plenty of videos, did plenty of research. Initially I was thinking, it's a novel idea, but do I really want to be doing that? But the more I thought about it, I thought, actually, yeah, this is really cool, because it does, having the curated collection, it solves the problem of the thousands of ROMs. Also, I was hearing how they were, not only curated, but they made sure the games were running as well as possible on the device. And I took the dive. I bought the Evercade VS with the Data East Arcade and Technos Arcade. I picked up the Bit My Brothers collection, and very soon after, or might have been the same day, I picked up the Oliver Twins collection. Just things I had nostalgia for. And yeah, I thought I'd just get a few carts of ones that were of interest to me. I mean, I'm no expert on terms of, quality of emulation, lag and everything, but everything I played seemed to run well, certainly better than I had on other devices. For example, the Sega Mega Drive collection I have on Steam, most of those games run awfully, the lag is horrendous. And so the Evercade stuff all seemed to run pretty damn good. Anyway, soon enough, I found myself picking up more and more collections, and things that I hadn't heard of or wasn't really familiar with, had no nostalgia for, I was getting interested in. I'd try some out and find games I really liked, obviously some I didn't as well, and I went from thinking I'd get maybe 5 or 10 carts for it, and now I have a full set. I've bought an additional handheld, well, 2 actually, because I have the EXP and the Super Pocket, or the Taito Super Pocket, which is pretty much ample for hardware for me, I think. But I have been getting every collection, and I can safely say I've enjoyed every collection. Some more than others, obviously. Now, I wouldn't recommend that for everyone. Not everyone has broad enough tastes or interests, or maybe the time to enjoy all these games. One welcome but also unexpected aspect of the nostalgia, I found when I get a cart and start playing the games, some I might know, some I might not, it really reminded me of the days back when we used to have computer magazines. You get a cover tape on it, or a disc, or in the case of the PlayStation, a CD, and it'd have a bunch of games and demos and things on there. And you'd play things which you wouldn't normally have picked up or wouldn't normally have given a try, but as it's on the CD with it, or the tape, or whatever, you'd give it, you'd at least try it out. And Evercade does that for me. So things that have really been the highlights for me with gaming on the Evercade, aside from the discovery, has been beating games that I played as a kid, some 35 plus years later, or getting involved in the community, talking to people, taking part in challenges, whether it's high scores or what have you, and really diving deeper into games through talking to people, or competing with them, or working with them, challenging each other to push forward. And I think that's been brilliant. Coming back to the question of what is Evercade, I think it's the retro gaming middle ground. It's a middle ground between, original hardware and original cartridges and digital emulation. It's a middle ground between novelty, nostalgia devices and, something you'll actually play on and keep coming back to. It's not going to be the right retro device for everyone, and doesn't need to be. Nor does every cart need to be for everyone's nostalgia. Retro gaming is very broad. I mean, it's just gaming from yesteryear. Not everyone's into all the old music or all the old movies. And, I think Blaze Entertainment are trying to cover all bases, whether it's with their collections or with their devices. So if retro gaming appeals, and you want plug and play, and you want physical media, and you don't mind not having, your big Nintendo titles, or maybe your Sega titles and things like that, and maybe you want things that are perhaps a little bit off the beaten path, as well as some big titles. If that all appeals to you, then maybe Evercade is what you're after. And if it's not, that's fine. There are plenty other ways to enjoy retro games, and no one can tell you whether it's the right or wrong way for you. Okay, so earlier on I mentioned how the Evercade VS, the EXP and the Alpha are more powerful than the original Evercade and the Super Pockets. While they are, it doesn't affect the games and to any great extent, or nothing that's really worth worrying about. Everything will work on these things fine, aside from those Namco carts I mentioned in the VS. It's also worth noting those more powerful systems have Wi-Fi built in. That's for doing firmware updates. This includes the Game of the Month, which is a system where for 9 months of the year, or about 9 months of the year, they'll give you a free game for 1 month and it'll be replaced on the next firmware update. These games will later be collected into the next Indie Heroes collection, which will be released the following February. Features are often added, like they've recently added analog support for third-party controllers, adding Turbo Fire and arcade game high score saving. Occasionally there are issues with the firmware, or things don't work as planned, but these things are usually done as a beta to begin with while they test it and get it all running. As I mentioned, there have been problems in the past. Personally, I haven't had any or nothing major. However, they do happen, and if that happens, best thing to do is get onto Evercade support. In my experience, they're not always the quickest at fixing things, but they do get there eventually. I won't pretend there aren't any issues with it. I've been lucky, by the sounds of it. I've had very few issues. Some people had problems with their EXP batteries not lasting very long or overheating, but mine I've had since a couple of months after launch and is still going strong. The battery life is still 4.5 hours, no problems, but others we're lucky to get 2 hours life out of it. Ultimately, if you do decide to get into Evercade, when you get a product, whether it's a cartridge or hardware, test it out, give it a bit of a run. If there's any problems, return it, get onto support or the distributor or retailer rather, and that's what warranties are for at the end of the day. And the last thing you want to do is get something, not try it out or not play it, and then have an issue and then find you're either out of a return period or out of a warranty or whatever. Also, my experience, the Blaze support have been pretty good. Just make sure you keep hold of your receipts or your proof of purchase, which goes for any product ever made with any retailer or manufacturer. So yeah, not perfect, not without some issues, but for affordable hardware and games and everything, I'm more than happy with the experience I've had. Anyway, I think I'm just about done here, so I'm going to call that a day on this video. I hope it's been useful, informative, or somehow maybe you've enjoyed my rambling, or just enjoyed the gameplay footage that's been on screen and muted me, because I wouldn't blame you. Anyway, that's it for today, and I'll see you in the next video.